Hey folks, back with you here this morning. On the last video I did, I introduced you to Joe S. Got a couple more stories to continue along this line. When I came back from Australia and was assigned to the 560th, they weren't quite sure what to do with me. So the commander said, since you've been out of the student training business for a little bit, maybe 3 years at that time, he said, we're going to put you through the PIT course again. I said, well, great. So when it came check ride time, I drew Joe as my check pilot for my contact check. So it wasn't a big deal. I was very comfortable in the airplane. So we took off, went out and did the area work, and then came back for a no flap touch and go. The winds had changed significantly at Seguin, actually in the whole area. So they were going to be doing a runway change. Well, if we went and parked somewhere or just went off the side and held for a bit and then came back, we'd be running out of gas. So Joe asked me if I would be uncomfortable doing a no flap approach and touch and go with a 10 to 12 knot tailwind. I said, no, it wouldn't bother me at all. But anyway, we came in on this thing and I could sense that Joe was just a little bit nervous because a 10 knot tailwind on a no flap is something significant. At any rate, we came in and I knew that on a tailwind, you're encouraged to pull the power a little bit early. So I said, hey, Joe, as we came approaching the threshold, I said, I really don't like this any more than you do, but the book says to pull the power a little bit early. I was on speed, so I pulled the power quite a bit earlier than what I normally would do. And I could almost hear Joe sucking air up in the front cockpit. But anyway, it worked out great. We touched down about 500, 600, 700 feet down the runway on speed. And I'll tell you what, it was probably the sweetest no flap I've ever made. And as soon as I touched down, I knew I'd nailed it. But anyway, lowered the nose, added power, continued to take off, and got back to the squadron. That was my first outstanding on a check ride in that vein, by the way. But anyway, Joe couldn't stop talking about that for days, and I just let him. Now let's wind the clock a few years later. After he left the 560th, Joe went up to Stanaval, did a stint up there, and then he went to the ATC Inspector General's office, where he would go out to bases on an inspection team to inspect their operations. So this one week they were down at Laughlin on a inspection, and Joe liked to run. So he was done for the day and he changed into his running gear, and he's running around the perimeter of the airbase. As he gets just opposite of the airbase on the perimeter road, he's starting to think, hey, it's getting dark out here and snakes come out at night. He didn't like that thought. So he's thinking, I'm going to have to run all the way around this perimeter to get back to the base, or they've shut down flying. I could just cut across the runway. Now that's made sense to Joe. So he just hooked a left and started booking across the runway. Well, it didn't take long before the cops were on him. They nailed him, and Joe's sitting there in his spiffy running shoes and his shorts, trying to explain to him he's on the IG team. Well, he doesn't have a wallet, he doesn't have any identification. So they haul him in, and he convinces them to call the team chief, who comes down and vouches for Joe. But as I said earlier, Joe was he was prone to these kind of gaffes, and you knew he was going to create one. You just didn't know when or where or how. Anyway, good to see you guys this morning. Thanks for tuning in.